because of COVID. So we decided rather than lose all of the movement, the progression, that we all reschedule as a virtual rally. It doesn't mean that we won't be having the rally at Lily D'Ambrosio's office, because we've got something very special planned, haven't we, Renee?
We sure do.
We sure do. So, just at this moment, until the COVID restrictions are in place, we thought we'd proceed. So thank you, everybody, for attending. And thank you for our guests for coming along and being good sports and being so patient. So first of all, our first guest is Karren Summers. Now, I think everyone knows Karren. Karren is the founder of Brumby Tracks. Karren is an environmental scientist, and she's also completing a master's. Karren, hello. And would you like to briefly, or however long you like, tell us about your undergraduate degree as an environmental scientist and about your master's that you're currently studying?
Sure. So about 20 years ago, I completed, or about that, maybe nearly on, I completed my degree in environmental science. And I got into the industry, and I was actually seriously gutted by the industry and the oh no, I've got an echo. I can't live with that. Yeah, so it was just absolutely corrupt, and it was just a trade-off on money. In all areas. So that was pretty bad. So then I've gone on and done my master's in animal science, focusing on equine science and focusing on and particular attention to the wild horse ecology.
That's huge. That's so fitting with what you are involved in now, Brumbies. It's incredible.
Well, I know. I actually thought when I came to discover the corrupt crap, I'm trying not to swear here, in the environmental science world, that yeah, it was absolutely, what am I going to do now? I've got a degree in environmental science and I have no faith in it. So it's only in the last few years that, moving on to doing ecology, moving away from environmental science altogether. Obviously, I'm passionate about environment. So now I'm trying to marry the two, and it's working really well. So I can talk their talk and understand when they're actually having a lend of us.
It's incredible, isn't it? Given what's actually happening for Brumbies in both New South Wales and Victoria, your studies would be incredibly useful.
Well, it's really eye-opening, because I see what they're doing using the conservation science against the Brumbies. So I understand what they're doing. It makes me so wild. So, yes, I'm trying to juggle being an activist and a scientist, and you're going to have to forgive me when it just all falls apart and I put the wrong hat on.
Can you give me an example of what you mean about their use of conservation science? Just an example, something that pops to your mind of their count, for instance, their surveys. They're using conservation methods that they use in conservation to study fauna, particularly fauna. So, an endangered species, we do a count to see if the a regular count to see if the population is increasing or decreasing. And basically they're using that against, in regards to the Brumbies. So without going into statistical info and all that stuff, I just see a lot of their what they're doing. It's crap. It really is. But that's
it's just
really
not
helpful.
on.
And we all follow Brumby Tracks, and we've seen your posts, and it's been really informative and useful. Tell me, you've told me you've also spent a fair bit of time, haven't you, in the Alpine National Park? Tell me your experience or your experiences. I know you go out camping up there, and we're thinking of probably both Victoria and New South Wales, but let's start. What's your experience of?
Well, predominantly, I've done my research, beginning my research with the Brumbies was in Kosciuszko National Park. So that was where I started, being that the university I was with is at Wagga. So it was just a short trip over the hill, more or less. And then I've gone on to look at the Alpine National Park. I have been to the Bogong High Plains looking for Brumbies. Yeah. And I've been there more than half a dozen times, and I've only seen horses once. And I've scoured the place up there. So that tells you how many horses, you know. And I actually went there one year. I did not see any horses. And I actually looked around and went, wow, imagine Long Plain looking like this. It would be so boring. Sorry, not saying that the Bogong High Plains is boring, but without horses, it's just not the same. But that's my opinion, and it might not be the vast majority of the public's opinion. So Alpine National Park, yes, we've had some great trips, really four-wheel driving from Tom Grogan on the New South Wales side and fording the river, going up to Davies Plain, which took us about a day to go 20 k's up a mountain, or 10-ish k's, I suppose, straight up a mountain in wet conditions. It was a fantastic trip. I'd rather do it on foot or on a horse, never in a four-wheel drive again. But yeah, it's getting up the top there at Davies Plains, and it was just blanketed in a deep fog, and I couldn't see anything, let alone any horses. So yeah, that was an interesting day. But then we went on to King Plain, which is right up the back of the Alpine National Park, towards the New South Wales border. And yes, Brumbies up there, nice healthy populations, good healthy habitat and environment. And then came over the ridge and down onto Limestone through Charlie's Creek area, plenty of Brumbies up there, as a healthy populations, not overrun. When I say plenty, I should choose my words more carefully. Yes, so then we came down to Native Dog Flat and out at Omeo. So that trip we've done a couple of times, just looking at what's off the beaten track, what's out in the bush, more or less. It really was out in the bush, I tell you. But a lot of pig activity. And what got me was that we camped on a pig activity area, hoping that in the middle of the night I would see that it was pigs or deer or horses. And it was definitely pigs. I saw them all having a great time in the mud. And then about 300 metres, 400 metres up the Limestone Road, I came across an area that had been just turned over like a plough had been through it, and pig traps across this area. So obviously parks are aware that there is pig activity and damage occurring, but still we hear that they are blaming the Brumbies. So that was quite, makes you a bit mad when you see that.
Especially when you've been there. And I think one of the images that we see repetitively are little small streams or watercourses and damage along the sides. What do you think about that when you see those images on social media?
Well, we don't really know what did it. So there is well, you can't really say much with just a photo or even a video without being there and actually studying hoof prints, whether it's cloven or whether it's a horse hoof. you can't really say. But there are a lot of instances where, you know, pigs and deer are wallowing species. Horses aren't so much. They would rather, well, as being horse people, we know that they will jump it, avoid it. But to plough straight through there, it takes a bit of training to get your horse to go through water. Yes. So, I mean, it's very ambiguous, all these visions of the stream damage, etc. And I mean, wombats, wombats love riverbanks, stream banks. If you want to go find a wombat warren, check out the side of a watercourse.
Well, that's really interesting. Have you seen some of Dean Marsland's? I think you have been following some of the videos that he's been taking.
His videos.
Yeah.
Yes.
Which has been very informative and showing how little damage there actually is. And of course, Renee herself went up into the Victorian Alpine Park and took photos of streams and so on. And she even filmed where a hoof print in the mud where some frog spore she found, which was really fascinating.
Oh, right.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that was
interesting.
That was pretty cool. There was you know, an abundance of frog activity up there, and you know, as you would expect any animal that would come down to water, they come down to have a drink, and that's all that horses do in it. They just come down to have a drink. But it was really interesting. Most of the frogs spawn up in the upper reaches of the Buchan River, up on just off Native Cat Track. The frogs actually chose to spawn in the hoof prints alongside the creek, which was really interesting.
Water temperature.
Okay.
The water, well, I don't know. I'm just guessing. The water in the small pool, as in a hoof print,
would heat up.
Would heat up faster. I mean, I don't know the temperature dependency on frog hatching rates or whatever, but it makes sense, doesn't it? That's
it sure
interesting.
does.
Yeah, it does.
That's really interesting. Yeah.
Okay.
Hugs.
Sorry, Renee. Go on.
No, I'm all finished.
Oh, okay. Karren, is there anything else that you wanted to add tonight? Is there anything else you wanted to share with us?
Well, other than, I mean, I said it pretty much at the rally at Melbourne, and I read off that spiel into that, although that microphone wasn't really working for me, so I don't know what was heard. So I'm just ready to get out there and make some noise in regards to the lies that the parks, I should say, are sprouting in regards to this damage and the numbers. I mean, 4,000 I heard on a breakfast radio interview today was 4,000 in the Alpine National Park. I mean, the numbers keep changing.
Absolutely. And I think that's the threat. There seems to be a common thing. It's the populations that are exaggerated, and the exaggerated populations are supposedly causing a lot of damage, whereas there isn't actual evidence for either. And I think that's the reality. I'm not sure if I recently made contact with a company. They're actually in Victoria that do drone and camera. Will do a population count using drone and camera, which is incredibly useful to know. Really comparatively quite cheap. I mean, it's $1,750 a day compared to $50,000 for a helicopter.
Well, that's it,
or for 2 helicopters. So, you know, just from that point of view.
I think important to remember that the horses in the mountains, in the Alpine National Park, they have not just appeared in the last 10 years or 20 years. They have been there for 100 years. So they're removed en masse now. There is going to be some really deleterious effects. As we've seen in Kosciuszko with the fires, the areas where the horses' higher density, mainly occurred, was not burnt. Chicken and the egg, okay, you could look at it either side of that argument, but it didn't burn. The vast grassland area on Long Plain and was not burned at all. So the same with the Alpine National Park. I think you remove the horses, it's not only just going to increase the fuel loads for future fires, but I think a lot we don't know about codependency and existence between species, i.e. Brumbies and rats, broadtooth rats, or
kangaroos,
some other species that we just haven't had any studies done on. We need to focus on the possible, I know that the potential benefits of Brumbies in the environment instead of focusing on the negative, because we're just missing a lot of, just a wealth of information out there, I think.
We seem to need a scientific report about the benefits of Brumbies to start.
Absolutely.
I know. So, okay. Well, there's been no questions come through, because I think what you've been sharing with us has been really informative. So I think, Gabriela, hi. As everyone will know, Gabriela runs Mountain Brumby Sanctuary. And Gabriela, would you like to tell us some of your history? Tell us about how long you've been working with horses.
Well, I was about 5 years old when my dad put me first on a pony with my Sunday dress, because we went for visit some families, Somehow that was it. From this day on, I've been in love with horses, ponies. That's how it started.
Yeah.
So actually my whole life I'm involved with horses. So then 1998, we moved to Australia and we bought one horse for my daughter. And then I got another one, and then which we broke in actually ourselves. And then I got very sick and couldn't ride for a few years. And then I was diagnosed to sit in a wheelchair, which doesn't happen. So I started my bucket list. And on my first point was save a horse. So I saved 11 domestic horses, including a donkey. Yeah, and then last year we started, that was like for women. So I'm not running the mountain sanctuary by myself. It's too big, So we've been 4 women who started the whole thing to save the Brumbies, and we saved all of them except one from New South Wales. So they all would be dead by now, if we wouldn't have them.
So how many Brumbies have you actually taken in at Mountain Brumby Sanctuary?
We saved altogether, including foals, what born 65.
Sorry, I didn't quite hear.
65, including foals.
That's incredibly good.
Yeah, and including 24 stallions.
So those Brumbies, you've saved them. Are you rehoming, or tell me what's happening?
Yes, we rehoming. So we train them that they're safe, and Brumbies are incredible. I think I would never buy a domestic horse, or so. I rather would have a Brumby. They're really smart, intelligent, and if you gain their trust, they're just amazing.
So how are you rehoming them? Is it through the Brumby community, or?
No, we have a website. It's Mountain Brumby Incorporation. We're incorporated now. We're a non-profit organization, and we just have started a new website recently. And we actually living from sponsorships, like you can sponsor a Brumby, and we have donations, but it's still not enough because they're eating a lot. I mean, we're down to 39 now, but still a lot, because in winter times they're just eating hay and hay. But it's fine. So somehow we manage. So where we really struggle with is because of all the current lockdowns, we don't have enough volunteers still, and we need voluntary trainers. That's our major problem, because it takes quite a while to handle a Brumby. You know, some pretty easy, but some take just longer. We don't know what they went through, some of them, you know. So
at this point in time, so it sounds like you need voluntary trainers.
yes.
So
that would be.
the way that you are seeking those, it's via your website. Is there any other way that you are finding them? Renee, do you have any input here?
Well, I guess, you know, the last 20 odd years dealing with domestic welfare on equines, the biggest hurdle has always been to get the right trainer or the right handler to help that horse move through to its next journey. And it's a major sticking point, I think, across all equines, not just the wild ones, it's also the domestic ones. And it's that real lack of engagement from people wanting to help you as well. And I think, you know, particularly in the domestic equine side of things, we are completely flooded, as is the Brumby side of things as well, because the rate of removals and how many they want to jerk out of their environment is just overwhelming the rehomers. And I think that's a huge issue for people like Gabrielle and all her volunteers, is keeping up with the rate. And, you know, this rate is all because of what they're putting out there as numbers that they have to get out. In some areas, you know, no Brumbies need removing. They just don't need, they actually need putting back in.
Yes,
you know,
nothing more.
Absolutely. Definitely.
Yeah. So, you know, getting back to the training side with Gabrielle, you know, I think it's really important to try and network with as many people as you can. And yeah, sadly, Victoria's been hit with COVID so badly, and it's restricted a lot of people being able to move to come up and help you as well, Gabby.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Of course, that's going to impact. What's the maximum number of Brumbies that you can have at your sanctuary?
Well, normally, when we started, we wanted just to save each one. Then there'll be another couple. And then there'll be another couple. So I don't know what's happened then, because last year in the lockdown, nobody could actually get to the Brumbies, you know, but somehow we got a permit, and me and her, we went a few times together to get them, because nobody else could do that, you know. But we didn't expect that it actually takes so long to rehome them. Some of them really take a while, you know.
Do they?
To trust you.
And you must have to make sure that they're going to a good home.
Yes, we're trying to match them with the right.
Right, and that would be a pretty big process too, I should imagine.
Yeah, and what we're trying really, that the people who adopt a Brumby, that they come more often to the sanctuary, visit their Brumby and get involved as well. Then we can see if there is a connection, because sometimes we had that as well. People come up to, they want to adopt that special Brumby, but they end up with another one, because it's just their bond, you know, and there's just something you can see that, you know, it's not always how they look like. It's about the personality, that they match each other.
So you really do try, it sounds like you put a lot of time in trying to match the Brumby with the possible new home. So that must take a fair bit of work too. Yes,
it does take a fair bit of work, plus all the cleaning, you know, feed them. So it's quite a big job, you know. So
have you had many occasions when you've had to say to somebody, I don't think this is going to work?
Yes, we had one or two when we thought, look, this Brumby is not suitable for you, you know, and they found somehow another Brumby somewhere what was suitable, you know. Sometimes it's like that, you know, you don't feel a connection, and sometimes I think people have other expectation from a Brumby, you know. So, and sometimes they're not patient enough. You need to be really patient, but then when they trust you, that's it, you know, then you're winning.
Yeah,
definitely do. Yes.
And I believe more in the natural horsemanship, that you don't force them, so that the that they actually do things for you because they want to and they choose to come to you. It's better than to scare them and break their spirit. I don't like that.
Sorry, what was that, Gabby?
I
didn't-
don't like to break a horse or Brumby's spirit. I like it more natural.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, that's really good to hear that you adopt those methods. Yeah.
Mhm.
Make the choice for the horse easy for what
Yeah.
you want it to do and more difficult for what you don't want it to do.
Mm.
Mm. Exactly.
So it sounds that what you need is volunteer trainers, but also
Yes.
you need contributions, donations for
Yes.
hay, for feed, and probably
Yes.
other equipment. So
Mhm.
if people could go to your website and maybe share that information with friends and those that you know would be likely to either look for a Brumby or support a sanctuary, it would be really
That would
good
be great.
for Mountain Brumby Sanctuary.
Yeah,
think-
they just need to go to our Facebook page, Mountain Brumby Sanctuary Incorporation, INC, and there's all the information.
Okay, that sounds really
Whereabouts
good.
is the sanctuary,
Pardon?
Gabriela? Whereabouts
Pardon?
is your sanctuary?
We in Victoria, we close to Broadford.
Beaufort. Okay, right.
Broadford.
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 Oh,
Broadford.
Broadford.
Yeah.
You can see you're an
My
Adelaide
accent,
person.
sorry.
Gabriela, what's the situation? Have you actually put in any application to rehome Brumbies from Burma?
Yes, but at the moment we can't take any because we have too many still. We struggle to
Okay.
feed them all.
Okay, and that's what Renee was talking about.
Yep.
All right. Is there anything else that you wanted to tell us about what you do or?
Well, what I'm trying to do as well, to work together with other groups, and the Burma Preservation Group, actually we're working with them too. So they actually agreed the 10 we applied for that they take them first as well and see what's happened later on,
Okay.
And I think that's important that the groups work together without having a go at each other because they all want the same thing. They want to save Brumbies. It doesn't matter how they do it. Each group does it a little bit different, but the main thing is every group wants to save Brumbies. And that's why I think we should communicate and work together.
I think that's a really good point, and I think that's something that's come up even from some Brumby groups in New South Wales. I'm not sure if Alan Lanyon has been able to join. He is with us tonight. That's something that Alan Lanyon's group is very keen to see greater communication between the groups.
Exactly.
Perhaps from, between the states as well as.
Yeah, we're working with Hoof 2010 as well. So she's from, Lynette is from New South Wales. So there are a few groups we're working together with, and that is really helpful,
I think when I say what I mean, when I say working together, and that's different from what Gabriela is talking about. I think what I'm talking about is sharing knowledge and information about how we can support each other.
Yes.
With what we're doing. And I think I've recently shared the big 177,000 signature petition with the Snowy Mountain Brumby Action Group. And I think they have got some sort of plan to also try to serve it in New South Wales, because obviously the petition speaks about New South Wales. It speaks about the issues, and it speaks about the fact that Brumbies are being removed and that legislation in force is actually being ignored. The heritage value of Brumbies is simply being ignored. So I think, from my perspective, sharing my legal knowledge, if I can, if people are interested, I'm more than happy to share that and in any way. So, that was a good point, Gabriela.
And I think if we work all together, our voice would be louder as well, and maybe then we get the legislation through or get heard more by the government. I think we achieve only more if we work together and get loud.
Yeah, that can be difficult though, because we're all, as human beings, we've all got our own personalities and we don't get along with everybody perfectly. And
Well,
sometimes,
sometimes you need to have your private issue, take it by side and just think what's all for. It's for the Brumbies.
I agree with you. Sometimes some people can't do that. And
Can I just
can
bring
try
up a
and you learn.
suggestion?
sorry, Karren, I can't see you very well. It's like
Sorry,
you're hiding.
I'm trying to
That's all right.
juggle my phone.
Oh,
It keeps sliding on the table.
it's kind of cute. It looks like you're hiding behind.
Oh, sorry.
That's all right.
If I bring it round, it just slides down. Just a suggestion in regards to what you were just talking about in regards to groups working together. I think a number of years ago, 2017, oh my God, Mel, you've got a new fur baby. Mel will, she can back me on this one. We got together and had a meeting at Talbingo. A lot of people attended, and the idea was to create not so much a group, but a board. So nobody was in control. Obviously, a coordinator would be needed, but several people acted as representatives for different areas. I think there was one for welfare, one for science.
Mel,
help
maybe
me
you
out
switch your microphone off just for a minute.
Who's that?
Mel, can you put your mute on just for 5 minutes? I can't do it. Yeah, that's better. Okay. Go, Karren.
Yeah, so I was going to ask Mel if she could come in, comment on this as well. Unfortunately, the Australian Brumby board, we called it, it didn't really go very far at all. It just folded. I won't sort of elaborate on any more to do with that. But Mel was present, weren't you, Mel?
Yes, I was. You and I travelled over together from Adelaide.
Yes, one of our trips.
One of the many.
It really had promise, didn't it, Mel?
It did. It did.
And there was a lot of interest. So, you know, we had, I can't think of any more of the representatives, but it was a representative for each of the areas, you know, several different areas, wasn't it, Mel?
Yes, scientific, media, youth, welfare, political. So we were trying to find representatives or advocates across the board to represent all the areas that were required to have a voice and advocate.
And then come together at a determined intervals and bring each representative to the table, if you like, what their interest group was had been working on or discussing or whatever it might be. Unfortunately, it didn't go anywhere. But being that there was no executive committee, it was everyone's on the same level playing field. We were hoping that would solve a lot of the contentious issues of glorified ego trippers. Did I say that out loud? Sorry.
That's a good point.
So do you think that would work today, or do you think there would be the same? It seems to have fallen away from what you said.
It dropped in a hole. Yeah, it dropped in a hole, Marilyn. I could see it working again with someone perhaps like yourself and Renee doing the coordination. Just food for thought, that's all. I mean, we've got Mel with the registry now, the Snowy Brumby registry. I mean, as I understand, I think that's only for Kosciuszko National Park. But,
look, I think off the back of you know, the failure behind the Australian Brumby board, there was always something in the back of my mind, and you know, it's part of, I guess, the instigation behind looking at Kosciuszko in the first instance, and then perhaps creating a model that would become a national thing. I mean, we know that despite the fact that people have different opinions, we really do cover the country. I mean, we've got Libby Lovegrove up in the Kimberley, Karren and Heather Buck are very active in South Australia. We've got Mountain Brumby Sanctuary in Victoria, and obviously there's various groups in New South Wales right up the coast, and we've got Southeast Queensland Brumby Sanctuary. And the intention was that all those groups would eventually come together and form a body for the Brumbies in an advocacy role, and be involved actively as stakeholders in updated management plans.
I think that sounds wonderful. The problem is, and we seem to continuously be faced with this, is the urgency. We are now confronted with an urgency in New South Wales because Keane is refusing to do what he ought to be doing. And similarly, a management plan, that's not for lack of legislation. It's for a lack of, the legislation, unfortunately, was rushed through. So it's very skimpy. But for better legislation that said, for a start, that the old management plan, any action would cease immediately on enactment. That's missing. That would have been good. And that the new plan ought to have been, in force within a certain amount of time, 60 days. That's missing. So what it's allowed to do is for him to continue, Keane to continue removing the Brumbies with little or no respect for the legislation in force. And that's a problem. So there's always these pressing problems. And what you've spoken about sounds ideal. It really is. I don't know what that noise is. It's really bad, isn't it?
I think one of the problems we've got to look at here, and Karren will vouch for this and many others will as well, that, it was quite a historic day 3 years ago when the legislation came through in New South Wales. Yep. And, Gabriel Upton at that time was the environmental minister, and, she unfortunately left and was replaced by Minister Keane, who I must admit has blatantly disregarded the legislation, and in actual fact he has hampered the collaborative efforts of the scientific panel and the community panel. And I think, Karren, you'd probably agree with me there, as would many others. There has not been the transparency and
total lies.
Yeah, absolute lies, and a disregard for the actual stakeholders involved in this situation, and that includes people like Gabriel and Mountain Brumby Sanctuary, Hoofs 2010, Indigo, New England, all those people that are putting their hands up to rehome the Brumbies rather than see them go to slaughter.
They're going to massacre them over winter.
Correct.
Until
so
this new plan comes out that we're waiting on now for Kosciuszko, I mean. If they keep trapping, which is what we think they will do until October, the population is in dire straits. They're looking at population of 12,500. We know there is not 12,500 horses in that northern end.
I think, Karren,
about 1,000 already.
Karren and I, recently attended a meeting where I can honestly say that a senior member of National Parks admitted that the number that was actually in the northern end of Kosciuszko was pretty much what we were saying was there. Correct. And, one of my points is that over the last 5 years of trapping, if the people like Karren and myself, and there are other people in the community that are regularly in Kosciuszko National Park, if we can identify 80% of the horses that have been trapped, there are definitely not the numbers there that they're talking about. I mean, we get, you know, Karren would agree, we get to know these mobs, you know, in these various areas. You know, some people name them and visit them, and obviously Paleface is a significant example of the Kyandra Greys that, you know, you do get to know these horses, you know, on quite an intimate level, you know, when you're going like Karren and myself and other people on a regular basis, you're seeing who's been born, you know, who's left the mob, who's no longer there, you know, who's moved on to another mob. You know, you see these mobs and you know that there are not the numbers that they're talking about. And my concern at the moment with, you know, the management plan not coming out is that they're able to trap under the 2008 plan. And, you know, when we talk about a management plan, you need to know the number. You need to know what you're managing. If you don't have that magical data,
that you don't know what the population is.
Correct. So if you don't know what the number is, how do you know what you're managing? You know, what's the carrying capacity? What are the other species that are inhabiting that area? And, you know, when we talk about this, it's important for people to understand that the Brumby population is occupying about 15% of the total area of Kosciuszko National Park. And we're talking about a subalpine area that's been heavily utilised prior to the park being established. You know, we're talking about mining, cattle leases, sheep leases, you know, and so now, and we've got snowy hydro too, and, you know, we've got mountain bike tracks and extended ski resorts, and you know, if you want to look at the impact of what the Brumbies are actually doing up in the park, you know, you're more likely to see, you just need to log on and have a look at the snowy hydro updates and the updates on the National Park website of the new mountain bike path, which is in a pristine area of the mountain.
I love to share Snowy Hydro's advancements on my page. Just love what they're doing.
Oh, look, and, you know, so, you know, one of the sad things, I guess, is, like Karren said, is that we are losing a lot of horses this year based on impact after the fires. And so it seems that the scientific committee or community, I should say, and Reclaim Kosci have gone from it not being about the numbers, but it being about the impact, mainly because they think that, I guess, the numbers are inaccurate. And I'm sure they're quite aware that, you know, the extrapolated numbers that have come out of these reports is just totally inaccurate and unrealistic.
But I think they know, oh, that's bad. I think they know the numbers are unrealistic. It's about, I think it's something that Renee and I have spoken about, is actually trying to identify who is behind the push to try to get the Brumbies out. And I think we pretty much came to a conclusion after a little research, is we actually feel that there are a couple of well-funded, quite extreme elements who simply want the Brumbies removed.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
There's some really bad noise there, but anyway, sorry, Renee, did you want to say something?
No, well, I think listening to Mel just give her thoughts on a couple of things has already answered a few questions that I would have liked to have put to Mel. And I guess, you know, one thing, Mel, that I would really like to know from you, because you are up there a lot and you do see a lot, is that, you know, the reported impact that Brumbies are so-called doing to the environment by groups like Reclaim Kosci. I mean, how far from the truth are they?
Oh, it couldn't be further from the truth, you know. We're meeting the scientific, some of the scientific panel people up with parks. There were comments like they've never seen Long Plain look so good. On the day we were there, we actually only saw 2 Brumbies in the whole day.
Yes, we did.
You know, and we were explaining that, gee, if there were 14,000 horses, we'd all be having to get out of the way because, you know, look, it's humans are probably the biggest impact in the park, you know, and you know, really the horses are, you know, it's an area, as I said, that is subalpine. The horses are mainly living in frost hollows, which are open plains, and they will graze on those plains and then obviously have day camps up in the tree line. These are not pristine environments. I want to make that perfectly clear. It is not a pristine environment at all and never has been for a long time. And the impact that those horses are doing is minimal, if none.
Yeah.
And you can quote me on that.
So,
Vegetative survey. Mel and I did a vegetative survey a couple of years ago, and I mean, the photos we got of the lush green grass, the growth and the rate of growth in that prime Brumby habitat around Long Plain Hut, for instance, you know, it was up above our knees. Those Brumbies up there do not know starvation. They have never suffered from lack of grazing. So Reclaim will say that they're starving, et cetera, they're dying, they're skinny. I mean, the visions that they took were from the lower Snowy River in the southern end of the park, which is in the Biadbo wilderness, where it is much drier and dense vegetation through, well, dare I say, the lack of the cattle grazing has created denser bush, a lot more of it. And yes, the Brumbies that are there were suffering from a lack of feed during the drought. But for them to say that's occurring on Long Plain, which is the highest density of the horse population, Brumby population, is absolutely ridiculous. And that's what they commonly portray in their propaganda on Facebook.
So do you think this is something that is also said about the Victorian side of the national park, the Alpine National Park? Is it the same scenario?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Right. I'm not aware of a group equivalent to Reclaim Kosci in Victoria.
Nick Clemon.
Right.
I'll write that name down.
Yeah, who's that?
Nick Clemon is our lizard man.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah, this one, yeah.
He's quite active in the Victorian Alps.
Must watch out for him.
He's been researching up there on the reptile population for some time, and is quite active, very much like Reclaim Kosci and Invasive Species Council.
Okay.
I think I saw something about that where he said, I'm sure I saw something, and he said the poor little lizards, these little teeny weeny lizards, they're getting damaged. Is that correct? Would that be him? Sure.
Yeah.
Something.
Oh, I have seen that. Yes. And I just scrolled on by.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, no, not another one.
I have not seen any bad conditioned Brumbies in the Alpine National Park, and certainly not in the Bogongs on the one occasion that I managed to get a glimpse of them. So it is survival of the fittest. We've also got to realise that there's going to be the odd Brumby that is ill, is skinny, has got something wrong with it. And as much as we'd like to catch it and take it home, as me and Mel have quite commonly thought about, yes, that horse will die. Oh, well, unless it, well, I can't say it will.
But that would be part of good management too, wouldn't it? If you really had a manager that was managing well, you would think. I mean, I know it's a bit exaggerated in such.
I think
big
if we want to
areas.
see the Brumbies kept wild and free. We've got to look at things more like a National Geographic photographer. They've got to sit there on the Serengeti and video or take shots of lions taking out zebra, gazelles.
Yeah.
It is part of the natural environment, and it is natural. So in regards to the Brumbies, I'm, as hard as it is, and I'm by no means expert at this, for sure, but I mean, I've got 2 orphan foals here. You know, that says it all. I think that here I am saying that we're going to have to accept that death and disease is going to be part of that ability to keep them wild and free. But here I am, I've snatched 2 orphans from the brink. But anyway, I don't practice what I preach, obviously.
Yeah. All right. Renee.
But we're going to have to accept that to keeping them wild, we can't
Interfere.
interfere. Thank you. Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
that's right. Mel, I just wanted to know, because, you know, quite extensively in the legislation in New South Wales, it talks about sustainable numbers. What would be a sustainable number in it for genetics to have their diversity and to still be viable?
Well, it's a good question. We'd have to understand what the accurate numbers were presently in the park. And you've got to understand fecundity rates. You've got to understand the constraints of the current population, and that's obviously water supply, drought, human impact, the fires. So I think that's why it's really important that we requested that accurate count, so that we could start looking at what was sustainable. Unfortunately, what we have here in Australia is a lack of research on wild horses and wild horse management. I know that, you know, Dr. Brandon Billy in Sydney University is working quite closely with Andrea Harvey to change the direction towards scientific research in wild horses. You know, people have always sprouted particular numbers, but it's all based on research on the horses that are currently there in the park. If you ask me my opinion, I would suggest that trapping halts immediately. I know that I approached Dr. Brandon from the Sydney Uni recently, when I just had a good conversation with him this week about the impact of trapping. And, you know, I questioned him and asked whether he felt that horses would go into survival mode when they're trapped to ensure progeny. There has been conversation in the past that when trapping did cease in Kosciuszko for a period of time, that populations started to plateau and the horses were maintaining their own reproduction rate. All animals and anybody that's researched any species of animal, that, you know, they're not stupid. They will know if there's no feed, they won't reproduce. You know, we've had ridiculous accusations that Brumbies are breeding from, you know, yearling age, which is totally untrue. It's usually around 3 years old that mares will have their first foal. You know, so look, getting back to a number, it is that magic number. What we need to, you know, my question to Park recently was, you know, do you want the horses there? How many and where? You know, and that's an important question that needs to be answered by Parks and the Minister. The legislation is in place, so there is meant to be a sustainable number. And, you know, we hoped with the scientific panel and the community advisory panel that we would come up with a resolution to this situation. And I suppose leading on to that, it's been why we probably established the Snowy Mountains Brumby Registry, to look at DNA collection. Several of our committee members have close ties to the Brumbies in the mountains and have, you know, historical ties to the park prior to it being established as a park. You know, those family records and historical records do talk about introduced horse breeds in with the Brumbies, and that is quite evident to people that travel throughout the park. You will see pockets of Brumbies that are quite significantly different from others. So the DNA collection for us was to obviously bolster the historical evidence that's been gained, but also look at how genetically diverse these horses are. I mean, they have adapted to an incredibly unique subalpine climate, and they also have, you know, their genetics have huge potential for our domestic horse population. So, you know, the DNA is a small part of the further research that needs to be done on these horses. The other thing too for us was that people that were rehoming the Brumbies could register with us and supply DNA, which would give them a better understanding of their Brumby and where their Brumbies, I guess, you know, genetics comes from.
Is that for Victoria as well, Mel?
At this stage, Marilyn, we are concentrating on Kosci.
Yep.
We felt that it was important for us to understand. Part of the new management plan was to look at a particular group of Brumbies. I know that the Kyandra Greys were earmarked, as were the peppercorn taffies, as particular populations within the park that should be protected and not trapped because of their new unique genetics. So for us, doing the DNA was to also assist in confirming that there was that genetic DNA in those horses to bolster, I guess, their protection, you know, with the legislation. Yeah.
It's an invaluable thing that you're doing.
Look, you know, it's it originally started with a couple of the committee members who were obviously undertaking a most unfortunate job, and that was gaining the DNA from obviously deceased Brumbies within the park. That's how it started. And then obviously through the trapping program, we have approached all the rehomers and sent them DNA kits in the hope that we will build up a really good database. And the intention potentially is to look at other people interstate undertaking the same type of activity as us, particularly in the Victorian Alpine region. It would be good to see, you know, that expand, because I think we do have a very unique, you know, wild horse that, as I said, has huge potential for the domestic horse population.
Yeah,
just
briefly, Mel, for those that are listening, how do you actually collect your DNA? I mean, some people may know it, some people may not, but just give us a brief rundown how the DNA collection goes, and where do you send it?
Okay, so we normally, well, we're about to do a video to set up, but we do send people kits, which gives them a fact sheet. Normally it's through mane hair or tail hair, if you like, if you want to take the risk, but normally we take it from the mane, and it's a matter of getting 10 or 20 hairs wrapped around your finger and giving it a good yank. Yep. You want to have those hair follicles. That's what's really critical. And it's a matter of, you know, we do ask people that they supply trapping papers or acknowledgement that horse is definitely a Kosci Brumby. You know, we ask for colour, location. The hairs are attached in a snap block bag and they're sent to us. And then we send them off now. We're sending them to the Sydney University to Dr. Brandon Velli, who's undertaking a much more advanced DNA program than perhaps the Texas University was.
Oh, wow. That's
yeah, so we're now looking at, instead of microsatellites, we're actually able to, with the DNA testing that they're doing, we can start looking at family trees and lineage of horses, which is going to be critical. It's a slow process, but the results are going to be really significant. So people can jump on the Facebook or our website. There are DNA forms that can be downloaded with information, and all they have to do is send their DNA through with obviously some evidence that the horse is from Kosciuszko at this stage. And then we'll send that off to the university. They own the DNA. So the owner of the Brumby does own that DNA information, but it also goes into our registry database.
right.
How long does it take, Mel?
Just a question, Mel. What happens if people come across Brumbies that are deceased out in the Kosciuszko Park? Would you still want them to collect DNA samples for you as well?
Oh, look, absolutely. And I mean, local people and committee members within the registry are up in the park on a regular basis, and we do have a good bush telegraph where we often find out, you know, it's really unfortunate, particularly with the expansion of snowy hydro. We are seeing, you know, those accidents between trucks and horses. It does happen. Unfortunately, those trucks don't stop. And during winter, particularly when they lay salt on the road, those horses will come to the road for the salt. So we do have people regularly notifying committee members, and we will go up and collect that DNA. But absolutely,
Right.
we just ask people that we get a general description of the horse, colour, sex, location, and the hairs, and then we'll send it off to the uni. At this stage, return results are slow. Sydney University have just received quite a significant amount of funding to undertake the DNA program here in Australia, which is just an amazing outcome, because in the past it's all had to go to Texas equine genome program, which is lengthy, and you know, Gus does an amazing job with the BLM and the Mustangs in America, but you know, our horses are quite unique, and we'd love to see an Australian university take it on board, and it looks like we're going down that path now with Dr. Brandon and Sydney Uni.
That's brilliant. And you know, if you're saying that that you're going to get a better result with going with Dr. Brandon, that's so much better for the Brumbies too.
Yeah.
Oh, look, absolutely, and they've done some you know, recent tests on some Brumbies, and some of the results are quite phenomenal. I can't say too much at this stage, but as I said, we're now able to look at family tree and lineage, and yeah, the DNA results are going to be far more detailed and significant than the microsatellite DNA that we were getting from Texas.
Yeah, right. Kudos to you and your registry to forge through this and yeah, put the Brumbies up and give them the value that they deserve.
Exactly.
Yeah. Oh, look, and you know, I'd just say that if anybody has rehomed a Brumby from Kosci recently, reach out. You know, we'll help you any way we can. As far as the DNA, we're also taking registration where people can register their Brumbies with us, and obviously enter Brumby classes in horse shows. And you know, we've recently taken on a very famous stallion from Long Plain, as Gabby would know, Splash. He's now got a home with the registry and will become our ambassador, and
Brilliant.
we hope that people will enjoy seeing his story. It's really wonderful to see all the photos coming through from people that have photographed him in the wild, and you know, he is just the most amazing Brumby. He has he's just shining like they all do. And we really look forward in the future to sort of sharing his story, and obviously if we're out and about at shows, Splash will be coming with us.
Brilliant.
So people can meet and greet. And, you know, it's all in an effort to show the versatility and of these horses. They really are incredible, you know, and so deserving. We'd all love to see them, you know, wild and free, but through the trapping program, the rehoming is just so critical.
Absolutely. Renee, I think you were going to, thank you so much, Mel, because that's been a lot of
Mel.
incredible information. It's brilliant, because it's the sort of thing that we need to hear about. And I think, Renee, you were going to share with us whatever about what do you want to tell us about Barmer, moving down to Victoria now.
Well, you know, I've probably got about 17 years of knowing the Barmer Brumbies up there, and you know, I guess what I want to talk about is what we do know. What we do know is that there is a management plan that's planning to remove 100 to 120 Brumbies per year over the next 4 years, and quite different from every other management plan in the other states is Barmer is an eradication plan. It does state it's an eradication plan. It's not a reducing of numbers or a culling. It is an eradication plan. So that is a critical difference that we're dealing with at Barmer, because the minister doesn't want any Brumbies left there. So now, obviously, with this plan, Parks would like to see rehomers. And but unfortunately there are too many Brumbies to fill the spots for every rehomer, which then brings into play that they do have to remove them via shooting. So we do know that the preservation group have got an expression of interest in for 90 of the Brumbies, which account for the balance of the other 10 that have got their expressions of interest in. So what we've got happening here in Barmer at the moment is a real volatile situation, because we have a sanctuary that is being established by the Brumby Preservation Group to take on these 90 Brumbies. But what we also know is that there are a number of conditions that have been put on the preservation group by Parks Victoria to come up to scratch or up to speed for this sanctuary to accept the numbers that the preservation group have asked for. Initially, Parks did say that they wanted, or that they had allowed 30 to go to the preservation group, and that the preservation group have openly stated that their sanctuary is open and ready to take on those 30. But there just seems to be some disconnect with what is really going on. And, you know, we're not getting all the answers from Parks, and there's a reason that answers aren't coming forward from Parks, and that's because that there's been quite a lot of hostility and quite threatening hostility towards Parks members, but also on the other foot there are some rather uncomfortable situations that have been forced on the preservation group as well. This week, the Barmer Preservation Group did put out an alert that shooting had already started in the Barmer, and they did state that it was by Parks Victoria. Now, we are sitting on a knife edge at the moment, because we've been told that shooting has started. We have been told that it has been by Parks Victoria, but what we don't know is how many were shot, when were they shot, who shot them, and where have these Brumbies gone to? we don't know any of those answers to those questions. So it really leaves a lot of tension that's going on between groups, between parks, between locals up in the area. And there are a lot of gaps in the knowledge of information that's being shared, and be that by the preservation group and by parks. The general public have got a lot of gaps in their knowledge to know what they're dealing with up there at the current time. You know, what's missing? We need to have some evidence that shooting has taken place. And I'm sure that there are many up there at the moment that are trying to find this evidence. I hope they find nothing, which means nothing, no Brumbies have been shot. That could be the best outcome that we could hope for, because it's extremely distressing to hear that there's a good chance that these Brumbies have been shot, but we just don't know. You know, statements from Parks Victoria, they're not confirming, they're not denying. But I think the stand that Parks Victoria are taking at the moment is that they've had to change their policy on what they're actually able to tell groups, be that the Brumby Action Group, the Preservation Group, the Barmer Brumby Hay Angels. And they've had to, I think, zip their lips because they're actually feeling quite threatened and hostile reactions from others up in Barmer. So that's really halted and stifled a lot of communication that we used to have with Parks Victoria, particularly the Northern Regional area. But I think in the current circumstance, they've had to adopt this new policy to give no information out. And I think that's where a lot of the unrest is, because now there's nothing coming out. We just don't know. We had...
Can I say something? Do you think they use the lockdown to cover up as well?
Look, you know, there's a lot of conspiracy theories. There's lots of ideas what could have gone on. COVID only stopped people travelling from Melbourne up to the regional areas. There's a lot of locals that are in Barmer that have not been affected by COVID that are out in the park all the time. I mean,
okay.
And, you know, I'm personally connected with a number of them up there that are out in Barmer all the time looking for evidence. And nothing has come forward. Nothing has come forward.
Can I, building on what Renee said, sorry, I just wanted to say one thing about information not coming forward. And I guess we're talking about Parks Victoria.
Yeah.
Historically, over the last year and a half or so, I've had a reasonable, I mean, I work hard at maintaining some kind of a communication level with Daniel McLaughlin, because that way you get information. So I'm incredibly respectful, and I do get some degree of information sometimes. He wrote to me in the last week of May as a consequence of a letter I sent to him, and I always write on legal letterhead, which works wonders. I always seem to get a reply. But he wrote back and said, it was almost like, it was just a short letter, but it was quite clear that yes, there was an application to rehome from the group in question, and that they had been asked to do certain things. An independent vet had been to inspect the property, and the independent vet had said that it was okay to let the 30 Brumbies move onto the property, but that for the remaining 90, the remaining 60, there was still a need for works to be done. And in particular, one of the questions was there needed to be certainty over feed issues. Now, after that, I've actually spoken more recently. Daniel has, once these things were in place, there was no reason for the remaining Brumbies not to go to the rehomer. That's what the letter said. If those matters were complied with. Now that he has said that again more recently, the more recent conversation again is only a few days ago, and I was told he wasn't prepared to talk anymore about what's happening in Burma because some of their employees had received death threats and that they have adopted that policy not to communicate at all now. And I put it to him, are Parks Victoria shooting Brumbies? And he would not answer. He's Marilyn. And now I've written another letter today. I've put it to him in light of the agitation and the increasingly volatile feelings. Could he at least let us know if Parks Victoria have shot any Brumbies? I don't know how they could anyway, because they haven't trapped. The whole plan is that those Brumbies that are to be rehomed, for which there are applications in, they will trap the number necessary to satisfy the rehoming applications. There are no trap yards set up.
No.
So why would they start shooting? Why would they work against a rehoming application other than waiting? The feeling I've got is they are still waiting on something. At one stage, it was put to me in a verbal conversation that there was an expectation that the Brumbies could be rehomed in the name of an association, but that Parks Victoria only wanted personal names, personal identities to rehome. Now, I don't want to hear from anybody, I don't know who is out there listening. I'm only speaking about what I have heard, one-on-one conversation or a letter I've received. I'm not making this up. This is not hearsay. This is direct communication. So that's from my perspective where it's at from a legal issue. And as a consequence of communication I've made, I've also asked Lily D'Ambrosio today the same questions that I've asked Daniel, except I've expressed it slightly differently. I've pointed out to her that in the past, Daniel was very communicative, but that I understood there were now issues. So let's see. I've also asked for an appointment for both Renee and I to go and meet with her to discuss the legislation, because I still want to see legislation for Burma. Whether or not it's realistic or not, I don't really care. It's something that I'm still focusing on because I cannot see, there's only 240 Brumbies left after the, what was it, the drought that was there. There's only about, is that correct, Renee? I'm sorry, I don't mean to take over what you're talking.
No, that's
I'm getting wound up here.
Yeah, no, I think, since that 2018, 2019 episode where it was just horrific with how many were affected by the huge drought, but also by the man-made flooding on top of it. But that's a whole other issue. But what's left now out in Burma is an extremely healthy, robust mob of Brumbies that are just looking amazing. Their numbers probably got down to, maybe 150-ish after that 2018 episode, I would say. Locals and just general knowledge up there and viewing the Brumbies from the ground and also from above, I'd probably say there's around about 250-ish out there at the moment. And, if they're going to be removing 100, 120 a year, they're basically taking half the population. And that is a real worry. They're going to have an eradication plan done in 2 years. They're not going to do it in 4 years. They're going to do it in 2. So that's why I think, an area like Burma, they don't need removing at all. But we don't have the luxury of that at the moment. But what we do want to have is some reassurance that these Brumbies haven't been shot, and under the current management plan for rehomers, like what the preservation group have started up, is an extraordinary feat to have got to where they've got at the moment. And I would really love to be able to know that these Brumbies aren't being shot when they could be ending up with the preservation group behind a fence, safe. Is that the ideal world for a Brumby to be? No, I want them all to be running free as well. But I think given that we have to work under what we know, and that is the current management plan, rehoming is the option to save the life of these Brumbies. And I think if the preservation group are being denied what they have put forward, is a real dangerous path for Parks Victoria to go, because they will be having a lot of angry people, and that's why we just want to have some reassurance from Parks Victoria that that sequencing of removals hasn't gone to shooting before they do the trapping, and honouring what they have said that the preservation group could have.
It's very strange that they aren't denying that Brumbies have been shot. You said that then they haven't admitted it and they haven't denied it.
No,
is that right, Renee?
No, well, what they're saying is they will no longer talk about what's happening in the park.
Right.
But why, you know, the claims that Brumbies have been shot is coming from the preservation group, okay?
Right.
But they're not giving much else. They're not giving out any photos or saying where or who saw them or whatever. So, you know, I guess it would be very hard for those people who've donated to the sanctuary, and there's quite a lot of people who've put in like $90,000, $100,000 to sit back quietly. That, of course, they're going to be very angry. I'm a bit concerned about the escalation of that anger. It's really quite volatile. I should imagine Lily D'Ambrosio's phone line is running pretty hot, to be honest.
Right.
So that's why I've written the 2 letters I have, one to Daniel and one to Lily D'Ambrosio today, telling them it's getting really volatile. I personally cannot see the benefit in any silence at this time. It's only going to benefit you. If there's no shooting, why are you not talking about it? And if there has been shooting, why? Why would you do that? And I think and why would Parks Victoria renege other than if a rehomer didn't do what they said they would do, but we don't know that. It's like there's something missing. You know, when you feel like there's a piece of a jigsaw puzzle and it's missing, and by hell, you think this does not fit. Well, I feel like that.
Yeah, I mean, I will speak on behalf of Kay and Jerry Moore, who are out in the park continually, and Kay sends her apologies for not being here tonight. She's got some other things that are happening. But, you know, I rely upon Kay and Jerry and some other local landowners as my pulse as to what's going out on the Barmer. And, you know, there's been no sign of anything happening to that extreme. So how clever are the shooters? How clever are Parks? It's unknown. And I think, you know, for any of us to talk on behalf of the preservation group, it's only them that know the information that they're holding on to. And the same goes for Parks. But I wish that both of them could come out and say exactly what's going on. And then we are able to get on and then go forward with what we need to do.
Yeah, there's a lot
if Park wouldn't have anything to hide, they could say, you know, they can come out and say, look, we didn't shoot them, they're still there.
Well, they've given us the rationale for that, Gabby, is that they've had death threats, that their staff, their employees have received death threats, and they are entitled to make policy. They make policy, and really, that's what can we say? It's like a daytime. There's this funny business going on, but anyway.
We'll see. I mean, we had Bev MacArthur MP, who was stood up in Parliament, and she's asked the question: are these Brumbies being shot? We haven't heard what the responses were as yet, so I'd be really keen to hear what Bev has to say about it too, Marilyn.
Yeah, absolutely. I think she's been very brave.
She's put it out there on her public MP page that she wants to find out what is really going on up at Barmer. She said that she will ask the question in Parliament. So I would like to, I would hope that we can get an answer out of Bev, what the parliamentary response is to it.
Maybe we ought to be asking Bev. I mean, why not? We seem I
did send her an email yesterday asking what the response was.
Oh, good.
If any at all. So we just need to, you know, build these little gaps in the knowledge that we've got about what is really going on up in Barmer, and then we can make a rational, not decision, but come to a conclusion.
We need to know.
We need to know.
I think now what we're thinking about the Alpine National Park and the Bogong High Plains. I guess where we're at now with that, because I'm looking at the time, is that, as we all know, the survey was open for public submissions for the new management plan, which is now closed. I was advised by Parks Victoria that the results would be published about mid-June, and I'm assuming that they will then publish the new management plan. It will be very interesting to see what the outcome is there, because we know that there have been many objections raised to any kind of shooting Brumbies, and yet we also know that in their proposals they had set forth, and we've heard it from the likes of Andrew Cox, that it's considered that whilst ground shooting may not be suitable, they would be pushing for aerial shooting of Brumbies in the Alpine Park. 500 Brumbies this year. That is just huge. It's scary. It's sickening, in fact.
Absolutely ridiculous.
And you don't have enough to rehome them.
But that's what they're pushing for. And the likes of Andrew Cox, who in fact used to work for the Wilderness Association and was involved in the Guy Fawkes shooting. He was part of organising that. Well, he has got the audacity to say nowadays that aerial shooting is actually humane. He comes out and says that. Well, I've been speaking recently about the assessment report that was completed about the aerial cull that took place. I think it was Alice Springs or Central Australia, and it actually proved that the assessment report came back that 37% of Brumbies did not die instantly. That's huge percentage. They took multi-shots, something like 6 shots per Brumby would receive, and that they would linger. They would take shots to the neck and the flanks and all over the place, and that they would linger. Well, that's the same as in Guy Fawkes. So I guess I'm spending a lot of time talking about that, trying to get media attention, because what I think...
just on the shooting, the aerial shooting, I was speaking to one of the fast shooters, the professional shooting team, feral animal aerial shooting team. I think that's what it stands for, fast. And they said that they go for the wither because it's a larger area.
Right.
And they do use overkill, so it's repeated fire from a semi-automatic.
Right.
Excuse my knowledge on firearms is very, very low. But yes, something that can be repeatedly fired so that they will just riddle one animal with bullets, that's overkill. Now, it didn't happen that way in Guy Fawkes, because as we know, there were numerous horses that weren't killed outright. They took 5 minutes to 10 days to die. Now, I don't think any National Parks Authority department would be foolish enough to listen to Andrew Cox and take on board anything, because
Well, Parks
we all know what happened. What was the outcome after Guy Fawkes? It was embarrassing for the national parks.
Karren, it is actually published by Parks Victoria that is what they would be proposing.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
But also, Karren, you've got to understand here in Victoria, the RSPCA here in Victoria green light aerial culling.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, and so when you've got the most so-called authoritative animal welfare organisation in this country saying that aerial culling is okay in Victoria, but it's not okay in New South Wales, there's a real disconnect with what the RSPCA is about. But what we've got here is the RSPCA have green-lighted aerial culling.
They can't do
There's
it
the
right
problem, and
in the desert.
that's what Parks hides behind.
But
I
they
think the
can't get
other
it
thing-
right in the open spaces
No.
of Central Australia, and yet they're thinking or considering the option for a mountainous region like the Alpine National Park.
Well,
That
that's
is
why
ridiculous, and they're opening themselves up for ridicule.
Yes.
we know,
Um,
but how to stop them? The thing is, even PestSmart say in their literature that aerial culling is unsuitable for horses. They just say it, carte blanche,
Yes.
unsuitable. And yet,
moving
despite
platform,
that,
moving target.
I tell you, this is the problem. Parks Victoria are heavily influenced by Reclaim Kosci. There is no doubt about it. Now, who is behind Reclaim Kosci? I would love to find out. We've got some thoughts and whatever, but you know, this is the problem. This really is the big problem. So that you end up, even despite after that fantastic rally that you came to, Karren, and we had the beautiful media, the TV report, you've got Lily D'Ambrosio being interviewed, and all she can say in a very sheepish way is Brumbies caused damage.
That's the best she could say.
That's all she can
Right.
say. Brumbies
Right.
caused damage. It's just ludicrous that they can even consider such cruelty. So
They're
how do we
opening
deal with
themselves
it?
up for a lot of civil, what do they call it? Disobedience,
Civil
public
disobedience.
outrage.
Yeah.
Well, I think
And I'll
that's
be there.
for Australia.
I'll be there with bells on.
Well, I've heard a few people say that. I'm just working on trying to get as much media as we can get. We are also talking about fundraising to possibly try some multimedia campaigns. We'll just see how we're going about that. But there'll be more on that
Multimedia.
soon.
Maybe
Well-
some volunteer media.
Well, I'm
people to
talking
help you.
about print media and on the internet, and maybe even some TV ads we'd like to
Right.
do. I've got a sound engineer on board who will give us a reduced rate. We would need
That's fantastic.
we'd need a producer. I've been meaning to talk to you about this, Renee, so it's a great time. So we've certainly got some very good ideas that Renee has put forward. Yeah, you seem, what do you want to say, Renee?
What, you kind of put me on the spot.
I know, I'm on the spot. Yeah.
Oh God, I've got some brain fog happening here. When you talked about the TV component of it.
Yeah,
we're working on drawing in some people that will give a lot more clout to it.
Yep, we sure are.
We sure are, and we're if we can get the people that can bring in the clout and the what would be the word? The
Traction.
Profile.
The profile, that's the word, profile. Thank
Yeah,
you.
we're getting
then it
there.
will make it really easier to hit up some other organisations and some private people that
That's
we
right.
know collaboratively to give us some money.
We need to do this. This is what it's about. I think it's about exposing the cruelty. Governments do not like to be exposed on cruelty. They get embarrassed. I think we have to talk up the cruelty. I personally think this is big. we know it's cruel, it's inhumane. Let's let the general public know. And that's what we were hoping to achieve with the rally near Lily's office, Minister Lily D'Ambrosio's office, because we wanted to make noise within her electorate. And we will be doing that. We haven't been able to do it yet because of the COVID restrictions, but we plan on doing a letterbox within her electorate, a little flyer in every, letterbox within her electorate.
Let me know. I'd love to letterbox drop.
Yeah. Oh, well, you'll have to come over for letterbox drop.
Yeah,
I can do a few.
You already offered, I know, but we had to close it down because of COVID restrictions. But we'll be doing that. We haven't given up yet. Well, Renee and I aren't giving up, and I'm not giving up the Barmer Brumbies. No. I just think we just keep talking. I don't know when. We keep talking with the coalition party. They certainly got a lot of good media from our rally in Melbourne, and we keep talking with them. I've got no idea when they're looking at the bill that's been drafted. Don't know what's happening there. The best thing that could happen, I know it's an issue. I know I've heard from so many people. The way the bill works, it's introduced. There'll be a first speech and then a second speech. I mean, each time, that means they read the bill from front to back, and then they do it again, and then they talk about it, and then they argue about it, and then they debate, and then they vote. I would love to see that. I don't care if that bill that I actually took a year and a half to write it. I don't care if it becomes, it doesn't in the end be it. I just want the issue of Brumbies getting shot spoken about. That's and in Parliament, the best thing we had over all this campaign, Renee, would you not agree, is when Wendy Lovell stood up in Parliament and sought a motion for all Brumbies. No Brumbies should be shot in Victoria, and it was passed unanimously. Yeah, and the MPs were clapping and standing up. Some Labor Party MPs crossed the floor to vote in favour of no shooting. Now, there is always different thoughts on this. Some people say, it won't get through. Okay, I think it would probably okay in the upper house, but when it gets to the lower house, it may not. That is why we must keep campaigning. Correct. That campaign letter that we've got running, that's why. It's to tell the MP who are uncertain, we don't want Brumbies shot. You represent us. We don't represent you. Yeah. So that's why it's important for everyone to tell their MP they don't want Brumbies shot. So that's our campaign, and it's pretty heavy going.
Is that going to be any help done from interstate, i.e. South Australia?
Sorry, is that?
So it will not help the cause at all for South Australians to see that,
that campaign letter.
Send it to their MP.
I don't see why. I think it's always helpful. I don't know. At this stage, it probably, at the moment, I think we've got two campaigns. Renee's got a campaign and I've got a campaign. And they're both whatever it's called.
Do-gooders.
Do-gooder. Goody-goody two-shoe campaigns. But we can easily make them national campaigns.
That would be good.
Well, it's very easy. We just tick a box.
Yep, we can do that.
But a lot of people in South Australia are so far removed from eastern states' issues. I mean, it is becoming better in regards to the Brumbies here in South Australia because there's more of us now, Brumby supporters, that is, and Brumbies, for instance. But, when it comes to these petitions for state-wide petitions, yeah, we're sort of left out of the race. We
Yeah.
can't do much.
Yeah, I think that's because, Karren, what we're going for here in Victoria is legislation. So it is
Yes,
a state
state
issue, and that's just the way the
issue.
Constitution is
Yes.
written up.
And it's very frustrating
I know.
being across the border.
I know.
Mm.
I know.
There's no reason why a South Australian couldn't write to Lily D'Ambrosio or Daniel Andrews and say, well, look,
Oh, no.
I'm
And
a
I
South
have.
Australian. I'm sure you,
I have.
you know, so any support, every support is helpful, you know, and that's we just got to keep fighting.
Yeah, we just
I
keep
got
going.
a good response from your East Gippsland councillors in regards to changing that. What was her name? A strange name. Sorry, I can't think of her name now. One of the councillors in East Gippsland, they all got together at Buchan, was
Yeah,
it?
they did. That's
Bruthen.
right. And that was
One or two.
Sonia Buckley.
Sonia and the others. Yeah.
Yeah, that happened down in East Gippsland, and it's also happened up in the Moira Shire, which is where the Barmer Brumbies are.
Yes, yes.
So same thing, the council has made a stand and passed a motion that they don't want to see Brumbies shot, but unless we have, you know, 40 or 50 councils in Victoria say the same thing, it's not going to make a rat's difference down in Parliament.
That's not going to change Lily D'Ambrosio's mind.
No.
But that being said, I have had contact from a councillor from the Shire of Diamond Valley encouraging me to send a similar letter to that council, Shire of Diamond Valley, and I'll be doing that. So that would be 3. He feels they actually recently passed a motion in council that the kangaroo, you know, the way they're culling for, what do you call it? For, yeah, you know what I mean, the horrible threats that they're doing. Oh, God, I'm brain dead. Anyway, so Shire of Diamond Valley is somebody that probably would support that kind of a motion, and there'll be more. So if people could write to their councils and ask them, that's another very good thing to do.
I mean, I certainly wouldn't be writing to some of the councils in the cities because they're very green and you're going to get not such a good response, but certainly the regional councils that do have a strong connection to animal welfare, and if they've got Brumbies in their electorate, hammer those councils.
Excellent.
Yeah.
I think we're going to have to close now. We're really, we've been doing this for nearly 2 hours, which is just wonderful.
You know what's impressive? The attendees number hasn't really dropped off. Everyone's been standing by it. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, guests. Thank you, Mel. Thank you,
Thanks,
Gabriela.
Mel.
Thank you.
Thanks, Karren.
Thank you for having us.
And Mel, thank you.
And Marilyn.
Bye. And thank you
Thanks,
to all,
girls. Appreciate it.
and everybody who's joined. And thank you for your patience and getting up and running.
Yes.
I think
Just
the
need
next.
to focus together.
Okay. See you all soon.
Bye.
Thank you,
Bye.
Marilyn.
Bye. Thanks, girls. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.